Prahinski, negotiations, shifting from avoidance to full engagement. Again, that's negotiations, shifting from avoidance to full engagement. Prahinski.
Good evening. In continuation of our last conversation, tonight we are going to focus specifically on those individuals that like to hang out in the quadrant called avoidance. Are you one of them? As we examine the avoidance quadrant, please note that there are times we should be hanging out there. We should avoid that conversation. But there are other times we need to not avoid, we need to step out and become fully engaged with that other person that we're trying to avoid. So as we have learned already, the bargaining styles include 4 main quadrants. The avoiding style is down here in the bottom left quadrant, and this means that we're low on cooperation and low on assertiveness. We don't want to have that conversation. But there are times, as we have learned, that we need to step forward out of that quadrant to participate and become engaged with negotiations. When we are operating in this quadrant, many of the individuals that I've heard from say, I want to get out, but this tends to be the place where I like hanging out. I like hanging out here. I'm most comfortable here. I don't want to engage. Many times they say, well, if I'm going to engage, I'm going to pop over to the accommodating box. The accommodating box on the far right side means that I'm pretty much saying, yes, yes, yes. And that means that you just got signed up for a lot of things that you might not have wanted to really say yes to. When we're negotiating, there are times that we need to say no. And we need to communicate exactly what it is that we do want, not always listening to the other party on what they want. But what many people in the avoiding box fear is that comment called competitive negotiation style. We want to avoid that style because it means certain connotations to those of us in the avoiding box. It means that we have anger, perhaps, negative emotions, drama, and we're going to have to deal with it. It might mean that I'm no longer liked for being who I am because I have to deal with this competitive person. And if I behave in a competitive fashion just to get my point across, I'm not going to be liked. And then there's this collaborating box, this, everything is beautiful, we're going to have a win-win. And isn't that what all of us aspire to? There are times we should not be hanging out in that collaborative box, and that's one of the things we want to get across. But tonight, again, we're focusing on this avoiding box, and specifically, I want to ask ourselves, why do we avoid? Why do we avoid? Well, most of the time, it's for things like fear of failure. We're afraid of losing confidence. Maybe we didn't prepare well enough. We have fear of rejection. They're not going to like me anymore. I might lose my job if I actually say what I think. Or fear of poor outcome. I might lose my pride. Maybe I'm going to make the situation even worse. Lastly, there are good reasons to avoid negotiations, and because it makes sense. Perhaps you're using it as a technique to actually improve your power in that situation. If I delay and delay and delay, guess what? They start freaking out. And then I have more power in that negotiation. As we talked about, there's these different styles, and each one of them is a good for certain situations. We want to behave in a way that allows us to select the right style for the right situation and the right person that we're sitting across from. So we have to practice some of the styles that we might not be so comfortable with. And this is why many of the people in the avoiding box say, I need to get out of this box to practice and behave in a way that allows me to get that experience for when I really need to get out of that box, the important time when I need to get out of that box. So one of the things we can do is, as we're talking to these individuals, suppose you are working with somebody who is an avoider. How do I get them out of that box? You might be asking. Well, my suggestion is listen. Listen carefully, listen closely, examine why they are avoiding. What are the reasons that they have? So we want to remove all distractions. We want to provide feedback, empathy, that we understand what they're saying. And I want to listen to every point that they make. And if I need to, I'll take notes. I want them to know that I'm hearing them. And then I want them to know that this is a safe space for us to have that conversation so that they can feel comfortable in stepping out of the avoidance box. We can have that conversation and be able to negotiate whatever that conflict is that we have. Now, here's your action plan. If you happen to be the avoider normally, I want you to try new styles. Get out of that box when you feel comfortable in doing so, but practice consciously that you're going to get out of that box. And the second the second action plan is for the other individual. Practice active listening. So if you happen to be working with an avoider, perhaps you're married to one, I want you to practice your listening skills because they need it for them to feel comfortable. Now I'm opening it up for questions. Chris, I'd love to have your comments.
All right. Carol, there's definitely been some comments here.
I saw that.
Yes. David asked, is avoidance one of the most common styles?
I don't have statistics on the different frequency for each one of these quadrants. I believe it is one of the more common ones, and the competitive style is also the one that we tend to choose on a frequent basis, just naturally. However, I'm going to extend that for a minute, Chris. I also have noticed that when we are in a face-to-face dialogue, once we get past that initial rough edge, that we tend to naturally gravitate towards the collaborative box. So if we can get past that rough moment, we can move into that collaborative box. Go ahead, Chris.
Do you think that age or generations place us in a specific box, wonders Lois?
I do not think so. I think it's personality that in our past history.
Or what about spouses? I think was a...
I can only speak for myself on that one. I'm married an avoider, and it's wonderful. I get a lot of things accomplished, but I will say that there are times that I have to sit and actively listen because I know that there are issues and I want to make sure that they are addressed in the relationship.
Rachel says that she used to avoid difficult people, but have found if you put them on the spot, they aren't as difficult.
Good lesson, Rachel. Thank you.
Get out of that quadrant, huh?
I'm suggesting that you practice it. Practice it, and then you'll start to feel more comfortable. All of us have a quadrant that we like to avoid, and it may not be the avoidance quadrant. I happen to not be happy with the compromising quadrant down on the bottom, and I'd like to avoid that one. So occasionally I have to practice. I see that we're out of time, Chris. I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up.
Okay.
I think that this is really a wonderful dialogue. I will look at your questions later, and if you have specific questions that you do want an answer to, I will get that to you. All right, if you want to contact me further, my contact information is here. My website is here. I look forward to expanding our conversation. Thanks so much.
At third place, Norman, our second place winner. Actually, you can unmute everybody, David. You can unmute everybody. We can hear them clap.
Okay. All right. Well,
so let's give a hand to Norman, the third place.
First place. It's not up yet.
At second place, Jim Barber. And at first place in our first ever mini webinar contest is Carol.
Oh. Hey, Carol.
Oh, my day is made. My day is made. Thank you.
All right.
My week is made.
All right.
How do you get ribbons here?
Yeah, I'll take the trophy.
It's all virtual, I'm afraid. But
need badges. Badges.
You know, actually, I wanted to. I warned everybody this would run to about 9:30. We're a little bit past that, but I'd still like to take a moment to hear from our first place winner, Prahinski. Tell us a little bit about what you learned from this process, maybe from preparing for it and from
Okay.
participating in it.
I learned that I was nervous beforehand. And I also learned that I'm totally swamped and my bandwidth isn't there. So I looked at the list of who is signed up and I said, oh my God, I'm the only woman. So it goes back to Coach Carol's comment earlier that there was hardly any women signed up. There had been, and for whatever reason they needed to drop off. So I was like, I have to represent all women. I've got to be on, and I better get my acting gear. So I spent today working on that webinar. I even brought my students into the conversation. I presented part of it today at one of my classes, and they were able to give me some feedback on who avoids and why. So I actually spent a lot of time on this today.
You did us proud, Carol.
Oh, I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful. Yes.
Great job, sister.
Oh, thank you, Sparkle.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this
This
event.
was well done. Thanks for your vision on this, David. Thank you.
I wanted people to let me know whether you think it was something that we should do again.
Yes.
I think this is the format that other clubs might experiment with trying as well.